Hi theory students. Today we're going to be learning about Neapolitan sixth chords. This is a very neat kind of chromatic device that was used from the Baroque period on through the Romantic period. A Neapolitan sixth chord, and hereafter we'll refer to it in print as an N6, is a predominant chord that may be thought of as an alteration of a 2/6 in minor keys. We alter the root, scale degree 2, lowering it half a step, resulting in a major chord in first inversion. So in the key of G minor, for example, if a 2 chord would normally be the notes A, C, and E flat, that's a diminished chord. If we were to lower A to A flat, now we get a major chord. The lowered scale degree 2 is a tendency tone, so we tend to double the bass, which is, in this key, C, if that's a first inversion chord, since we'd rather not double the tendency tones. In terms of the voice leading, we take lowered 2, the root, down to the leading tone as a Neapolitan resolves to a 5 chord. Resist the urge to take the lowered 2 to regular 2. We're not going to cancel the Neapolitan element, and we won't use a Neapolitan chord if we really want it to be on the unaltered 2 in that voice. With the bass moving from scale degree 4 to scale degree 5, and with flat 2 in an upper voice going to raised 7, the other voices are easy. 6 goes to 5, and 4 in the upper voice, not the bass, goes either down to scale degree 2 unaltered, or it stays on scale degree 4 if you use a 5/7 chord. I'll show you what I mean. So first, our basic premise here. Here's a 2/6, and as we normally do with a 2/6 in minor especially, we're doubling the bass, scale degree 4. And normally I would take that 2/6 this way in going to the 5 chord. The reason I do that is because I don't want E flat in the alto going to F sharp, the leading tone. So that goes down, that goes down, that does too. If I were going to a 5/7, I would keep the C where it is and have an incomplete 5/7. So, very simple now to turn this into a Neapolitan. We lower scale degree 2, and it's typically either in the soprano or in the alto voice. So now instead of this in the key of G minor, where that's G minor, instead of this, we now get this. And of course that resolves to 1. What's kind of neat about this Neapolitan chord, and what composers liked about it, was that it's a major chord, and major chords should have a bright sound, but because it's a major chord based on lowered 2, it brings in some of the characteristics of the Phrygian mode, and it's very dark color. So it's kind of like a major chord, but one that sounds dark, not bright. Very interesting contrast. In some instances, composers found the motion of flat 2 to raised 7 to be a bit harsh, because that interval is a diminished third, and it's not the typical interval we would find in a melody. When they found that to be harsh, they solved the problem by filling in the note in between flat 2 and raised 7, namely the tonic, scale degree 1. It's either used as a pure passing tone, so from here, passing tone to the 5, or they supported either a cadential 6/4 or a 7/7 of 5 chord. I'll show you how this works. So in the first instance, here's our Neapolitan going to cadential 6/4 and its resolution. Notice that the cadential 6/4, as usual, is in a strong place rhythmically. So we want flat 2 to go to the leading tone, but we put the tonic in between, and that's our cadential 6/4. Doing the voice leading the way we had before. Note it's important for flat 2 to be above scale degree 6, otherwise we'd be moving in parallel fifths going into the cadential 6/4. And of course the cadential 6/4 resolves that way. So now it sounds like this. And resolving to 1 eventually. We could also have a secondary chord, in this case a 7/7 of 5, and that can be either in a strong position just like the cadential 6/4, or here it's in a weak position in the meter and resolves to the 5 in a strong position. So the same idea, we've got lowered scale degree 2, we go through the tonic on the way to the leading tone. But now if we think about what a 7/7 of 5 is, it's a C sharp, an E natural, a G, and a B flat. So from here, we have to make that natural, and it's a little unusual as we go on to the 5 chord. It's a little unusual because most of the time when we raise a note, it's for the purpose of taking it up. Here we raise this to just make the diminished 7th chord, but we're going to take it down. And this is a pretty cool sounding chord. So instead of going directly, instead we do this. It's neat that we get chromatic bass, and in contrary motion, chromatic upper voice. So it's a very good combination as well. When we approach the Neapolitan, most commonly we'll be using a tonic chord, either in root position or first inversion, or a 6 chord. Anything that goes to the predominant can go to the Neapolitan generally, or sometimes we may even have a non-altered chord like a 4 chord going to the Neapolitan. So if that's our typical Neapolitan, imagine that we're coming from a 1/6. Be very careful here. You don't want a situation like this, where you double the wrong note in the 1/6 and have to move everything up in parallels. We know better than that. But instead, usually when the 1/6 goes to the Neapolitan, if we're going to double that note there, then we'll move everything in contrary motion. So now from here, Or if we have a 4 chord, the 4 chord actually is almost like the Neapolitan. The only difference is this voice. So sometimes we arrive on the 4 chord and then alter one note and go that way. Note that if I get there from a 6 chord, normally a 6 is a tritone away from a 2 chord in minor. Here, because of flat 2, the root of the 6 chord E flat is a perfect fifth away from the root of the Neapolitan, and that works rather nicely. So imagine that I've got that and that and this. So here from the 6th chord, and that works well too. Some of the less common but still useful applications of the Neapolitan. The Neapolitan works well in a descending chain of 6/3 chords in minor. So you might hear something like this. Where we get a 4/6 going to a 3/6, and not a regular 2/6, but a Neapolitan, 1/6, and then perhaps 5/4/3 to 1. And you see the role of the Neapolitan instead of in the melody. A very nice expressive element. At other times, composers choose to tonicize the Neapolitan. This expands the predominant area. In a case like this, they would use it in root position and double the root, flat 2. So you would have something like a Neapolitan, a 5/7 of the Neapolitan, and go back to the Neapolitan, only in this case we're not going to be using it in first inversion, but we'll be using it in root position. Sometimes then, before we move on to 5, composers will bring it to first inversion, and then it works just the way we've seen it before. When we go directly to 5, then we're actually moving a tritone in the bass. But at this point, we have enough dissonance that composers figure that's just part of the game. And finally, occasionally we'll hear this being used in major mode, but mostly it's a minor key device. If it's used in major, it would be considered a borrowed chord from minor, the same way we've been learning about borrowed chords from the other minor chords in the key. Be careful if we're borrowing this from minor that we're not just lowering scale degree 2, but we have to lower scale degree 6 as well. That's all for today. Thanks, and use those Neapolitan 6th chords well. They're a neat chord.